Cheryl Kirk Knoll. Focus questions. Why does Haruno travel to Japan? How does Haruno help to preserve the heritage of her people while they are living in the internment camps? 7-year-old Haruno's black eyes sparkled with delight as cousin Yuki's kimono swished and flared to the lilting Japanese music coming from the old phonograph in the corner. The year was 1931, and 15-year-old Yuki was visiting her grandfather's farm in a beautiful valley near San Francisco, California. That evening, Haruno and Yuki's aunts and uncles and friends looked forward to performing a kabuki play, a style of Japanese theater that tells stories with song and dance. The old hall would be filled with farmers and their families who now lived in America, but who still enjoyed the bright costumes and exciting drama of kabuki. Yuki had learned several native Japanese dances she now practiced and planned to perform at intermission. Come, Haruno, Yuki beckoned to her small cousin. You may be young, but you are big enough to learn this dance. Haruno jumped up quickly and followed Yuki's every move with her head and hands, just as she had followed her with her eyes. Very good, cousin Yuki exclaimed when the music ended. I will ask your mother. Maybe she will let you perform with me this evening. Haruno did dance with her cousin Yuki during intermission, and the whole audience clapped and cheered. A gentleman from the big city was watching and was especially impressed. This child has tremendous talent, he told Haruno's mother. She should go to the Takibana dance school in Tokyo, Japan. She will learn the beautiful Japanese dances and become a great dancer. Haruno knew only that she loved to dance, but her parents did not forget the gentleman's words. 5 years later, when she was only 11 years old, she boarded a ship with her grandparents and returned with them to Japan. Each day she went to school and then to her dance lesson. 20 minutes was all she had alone with her teacher, but she stayed much longer each afternoon, watching and copying the other students, learning their dances as well as her own. Sometimes Haruno was lonely for her family, her parents, her 2 brothers, and her 3 sisters. She wrote them letters about her life in Japan, about living with grandfather and grandmother, about learning to read and write in Japanese, and about learning to dance. Then her cousins would come to visit, and the days would be filled with fun and laughter, just like back home. As Haruno grew older and prepared to finish high school, she didn't notice that anything was different, but grandfather did. One day he called for Haruno to come and speak with him. Haruno, he said, it is time for you to go home. Things are changing. Very soon I feel that Japan and the United States may be at war. Haruno was startled. She loved both of her countries. How could they ever fight each other? But she knew grandfather was wise and that she must listen to him. Grandfather continued, before you go, you must receive your dancing name. You have worked long and hard, and I want you to take back to America something valuable from your time in Japan. The very next week, Haruno stood poised before the headmaster of the dance school. As soon as he nodded, she began to dance with all her heart and skill. The music died away and she waited to hear the report. Yes, Haruno, he said with a smile. You have danced magnificently. You will receive your dance name to show that the Takibana Dance School honors you as one of its own. Haruno's dance teacher came to her side. My name is Saho, bird of paradise, and I have taught you well. So I give you a name that shows you are my student. You will be Sahomi Takibana, Sahomi, sailed back across the ocean to her home in California. Just as grandfather had feared, within a few weeks the United States and Japan were fighting in World War II. Overnight, the Japanese people living in America were accused of being spies. Because Japanese Americans looked different from most other Americans, and because so many people in the United States had never met a Japanese person, non-Asian Americans were afraid of them and thought they might help Japan in the war. So even though Japanese Americans loved their new country and were very loyal, the United States government ordered them to move from their homes on the West Coast and sent them to live in internment camps. It was not fair, but Sahomi knew they had no other choice. Her family had lived as good, orderly citizens. In a good and orderly way, they boarded the bus that took them to the distant Tanforan Assembly Center. When they arrived, Sahomi choked back a feeling of sickness as she set down her suitcase and looked around. The center had been a racetrack, and the smell of horses still hung heavily in the stalls that had been converted into places for people to live. She blushed with embarrassment every time she needed to use the bathroom and had no place to go but the doorless latrines everyone had to share. After a few months, Sahomi and the other Japanese Americans were told to board a train headed for Delta, Utah. 3 days later, they arrived at the Topaz Relocation Center. Like the Tanforan Assembly Center, this internment camp, too, was far different from Sahomi's comfortable homes in California and Japan. Here, the bathroom stalls had doors, but everyone still lived very close together. Families crowded into long rows of barrack apartments. Each room was lit by a single bulb hanging in the middle of the ceiling and heated by pot-bellied stoves that burned coal and wood. Only the latrines and laundry rooms had running water. Families shared meals at long tables in a large dining hall and reported for roll call each morning. Because they were living in the middle of the severe desert, the internees sweltered through the blistering summer heat. They also shivered through frigid winter nights. During dust storms, fine sand blew through the cracks in the walls and coated the few belongings that Sahomi and her family had brought with them. The people still enjoyed being entertained, so they asked whoever had a talent to share it. "Please teach our children to dance," some parents asked Sahomi. Once again, Sahomi had a stage on which to perform. This was not what I expected, she thought, but I can still share the dances of Japan with people around me. If I ever want to be a professional, I can never stop dancing, even when life is hard and unfair. The children at Topaz went to school in the internment camp. After class, an eager group would gather around Sahomi as she patiently taught them the delicate steps of the dances that were as familiar as her own thoughts. When she taught her students, Sahomi explained the story and meaning behind each dance. They learned the dance of the old ruined castle on a moonlit night and acted out the parties in the beautiful gardens of a castle in Japan. For the cherry blossom dance, Sahomi showed the children how to flutter their fans like the fragrant pink mist that surrounds Japan's mountains in springtime. After much practice, her students were ready for their first recital. Because of the oppressive summer heat, the children did not dress in the traditional heavy kimonos. "You may be dressed simply," Sahomi told them as they stood ready to ascend the stage, "but you must dance your very best. Make the beauty of the land and stories of Japan come alive to everyone who sees you." Parents and friends smiled their appreciation as they were transported to a different, more beautiful time through the children's dances. After 3 long years, the American government realized what a terrible mistake it had made by imprisoning loyal citizens. The war was ending, and the Japanese American people were allowed to move anywhere they wished. Sahomi's father wanted to see what the East Coast was like, so Sahomi moved with her family to Pennsylvania. At first, she could only get a job as a cook, even though she didn't really know how to cook. But she kept taking dance lessons. She wanted to learn ballet, and kept performing and teaching.